Hello and welcome back to our class. This is Introduction to Information Technology 2, the 11th meetings. We will continue our discussion about the low code and no code development. And today we are going to explore furthermore into one of the practice and application of uh, game programming using the no code development method. So in this occasion, we are going to discuss how the game programming could be used as one of the activities that we can use to create games in the digital objects in the information technology. So before we begin, let's take a look first about the definition or the understanding of game programming, because the game programming is a method that usually become a high-tech method in the science of programming, because it requires us to be able to focus and to gather a lot of variables, a lot of assets, and a lot of different things that we are going to learn in this meeting. So in game programming, there will be no amount of planning that can fully safeguard you against what we call problems, or in our saying, it will be a production bottlenecks, or what we can say impending deadlines, or where undertaking a project without a plan will always become a risk that will make you fail in this game development. So that's why it is important to know what to be able to use, what we have to prepare in order to make sure it is the required efforts that we can use in terms of methods, application, and also on how we promote our games. So let's start from the first question. What is game development? So in a short term, game development is a part of a process to develop a game from its initial concept or idea to the finished product. It will depends on the game and the teams, usually in term of studio that will take the projects. This could also be developed individually, and we call it indie developers. And it can take time from a short of few weeks to over a decade of time to be able to manifest the games that we wanted to produce. It will also involve a lot of expert in designs, artists, programming, writers, tester, and this is only the small list that we will have to prepare in this game development. So that's what is the game development is. Now we know about the game development, and we can assume a little bit on what we have to prepare. So let's move on into the next topic. Now we could try to compare first about what is a game design and what is a game development. So this kind of process is an entire two different terms, where even though that it's different, they are often used and known as almost the same things that we do in game development or game programming. But this is what we need to know first. this is the terms that could be interchangeably. For example, the game design, it should refers to the conceptual side of things. It's the concept and the plan and the first thing that we need to do when we are going to focus on our design and our preparation on the game development. So it will include the initial vision, the mechanics, the story, the characters, the location, and the list still goes on. And this is only the part of the game development or game programming, and it's not comparable to what the game development is, because game development is a broader term that covers games designs and additionally includes the technical implementation of the game concept. So game design is the part of the game development and also become the main part in that game development as well. So for example, in many smaller game development studios or individuals developers for game programming, some of them have colleges or third parties that usually hold things at the same time and take the responsibility at the same time for almost all the fields that mentioned above. But at larger game production, this is not the same, because usually design and developments are often handled separately, and it is the way it is. And it should be taken into account because this kind of terms, this kind of activity would really become the part of the game programming, and it will affect the game activity, the game development activities, for a worse or for the better. Now let's move on to the next discussion, which is the stages of the game in developmental process. This is also important to be kept on mind because the stages should able to reveal what we have to do in order to make the game development finish and give an output for the better, and also we can uh, give it to the society with the highest quality as possible. So these stages or phases are broken into three main stages: the pre-production, the production, and post-production process. So let's take a look into that three main phases. The first one, the pre-production phases. This phases is the planning phase, where we start to brainstorm, where we start to print out our idea to become a game. But this kind of idea that has been printed or has been prepared are are something that we have to prepare into a detailed plan of action in order to make it into a reality and make it successfully into a game. And the first step to do this is when we create what we call GDD, and it stands for Game Design Document. It will serve as the first sprint, or what we call blueprint. From this, what will start the build of your first game. It will also able to combine and create and unify our workplace, where us, even though that as individuals or in teams, will combine all of our knowledge, our documents and project together. Hopefully this kind of game development should be able to be uh, done in a team cases, because this is completely a huge progress and process that require a lot of expertise, as I mentioned before. But if this is not possible to be done, it will always okay to become an individual developers. But these kind of things will take too much of your time, your energy, and even risks. So be prepared on what you are going to ask if you are going to become an individual game developer. I'm not saying that it is impossible, but it will be a bit harder than when you are going with the team to in order to focus on the game development. Also, in pre-production, there are always the frequently asked questions, where in this space, the pre-production stage is the situation where the writers, artists, designers, and developers will collaborate, combine their skills, and also determine the scope of their future games. It will also include the coming up idea on how the game will be operational, or how it will be work, how it will function, how the characters look, how the characters be designed, and how the storyline of the games move. That's why this kind of FAQs, frequently asked questions, happen. And the most basic question that needed to be answered are: first, what is the core idea behind the game? How can it be summarized in a pitch? Or in the short term, what is the synopsis of the game? And you have to able to answer that. For example, I wanted to have a really interesting horror type romantic role-playing games that focus on the lore of the Indonesian people, where we have a lot of love story and also have a traditional horror urban legend. And we have to summarize this kind of synopsis into something good. That's why we call it a pitch, because this will also gather investors, because sooner or later when we are going with game development, cost will become bigger and bigger, and that's why in the big game projects there would always be an investor. The next question is: how is we determine the genre of our games? There are a lot of genre of games that we supposed to be know of, but if you are not familiar with the genre, you can always do your own research about the genre. The most interesting one and the most popular ones, such as role-playing games. There's also first-person shooters, there are also action games, arcade games, and all other genre that could be picked for. It will also be focused on other question: who is the target audience? In the today's world, the target is not always about the kids anymore. Even the adults are a better target now, because comparing to the small kids, they doesn't have any available funds to buy the games, to buy in-game purchase and other things, instead of the adult who has works and have a lot of money to be spent on games. That's why we also need to target it wisely, because it's not all about how fun we can create a game, how joyful it is to make a game, but also how can it be a profitable activity in game development. The next question is, when and where does the game take place? As I mentioned in the synopsis, we also need to have our lores of the games. Our instead of urban legends, maybe you want to have the historical sites. That's fine too, as long as we don't uh, see or we don't infringe the copyrights of other people's property. We also need to ask and answer the question, who are the characters? It could be something fictional. It could be something about history, because usually in history we don't meet with the copyright infringement. And also, if we want to use real person, we can use someone based on if they give us permission, and make sure that the permission is written, because even though they say by themselves that, oh, it's okay to use my name, but when it goes bigger and they have some opportunity to sue you because of using it, and you have no proof about the permission, then you will lose. And it is a common thing happen. So in order to get a permission license, whether you ask them to give you written permission, or you can just use someone that you know, you trust, or even yourself as the game characters, it would also be something popular that you can use. The next question is about what is our estimated cost to develop this game. We also need to answer this kind of things, because even for a start, game development will start with us buying our game engines. That's why estimated costs should be able to be written and planned accordingly. We also need to answer if we need to hire third parties, if we are in as an individual developers, or as a huge company of game developers, will we need to hire additional team members who we doesn't have the experience or the skills or the expertise that he is or she is in. And it should be planned wisely. We also need to answer the question about how we will monetize the game. What is our estimated time frame for the launch? This should be able to be answered in accordingly to the situation of your planned games. And also, to answer some of this question, the backbone of a developer games design document. So some details are likely to change over the course of the game development process, but this is entirely common things, and it is a sign of a good measurement and good game development process. That's why this is what we can measure of the readiness of how we created things. Let's move on into the next topic. Still in the pre-production, we now uh, something that we call prototype as the process in pre-production, where prototype is one of the uh, word that we use to give a pilot or a synopsis of our games in term of visual way, where we can in a limited way use the game. So this is also important because it's common for prototype to showcase the environments, characters, control schemes, and other in-game elements, because this will also build as a promotional tools for us, for our name as a game developer, and we can share it to our potential players, and even we may able to get some really good or even better investor for our games, because sometimes we can give them something like a early access to our game in exchange of a donation to to be able to give them uh, us a better profit in any kind of form. Prototyping also is an action or an effort that should be invested into world building, which means ideas are fleshed out in the form of storyboards, concept art, interface mock-up, and so on, so that we can see how it look, it feel, and how it can interact with one and another. This is important to showcase not only for the audience, for the potential player, but for us in term of teams, and even as individual game developers. We also need to see in prototype base, because when we are going with prototype, we will come up with an idea, with an analysis, and even some feedbacks about how we can change our games into a better game, even if it is different from what our plan is. That's why I say this kind of things is important even in the pre-production phases. So that's all about the pre-production phase. Now let's move on to the second process. If we are finished with this, we have seen the prototype, we have all of the things that we need to prepare in order to develop the game. Then we move to the second phase, which is the production phase. The production phase usually consists on several teamwork such as design, programming, art, graphic, and audio and testing. This is entirely optional. Some of them are even larger in certain game developments, and sometimes it even smaller, because we can also combine design and art, graphics and audio at the same time, and we can also combine programming and testing. It is entirely optional that we can do, because in production stage of the game development, we as the team can do any uh, conceptual activities to create during the production phase, because we can turn these activities into source code and various assets. That's why this is called the production phase, because it will consist on two main things. The first one, which it is source code. The second one is the assets. And assets is the term that we use in game development as the media that we can gather and use in the game. It consists of graphics, text, audio, and other things related to multimedia content. So in this production, instead of producing the source code in focus way, we also need to focus on getting the various assets of the game, because it's where the bulk of development time, effort, and resources go. We don't have time to do thing by thing, but we need to multitask, even though that we are limited into certain activities. We need to make sure that we can do this in multitasking method. So let's take a look a little bit more about the production phases, which is the design, the programming, art, and also the testing phase. The first one is the design. Designs are in a form of a team where they will continue work from the first pre-production stage. They will work together with the artists, they will render character models, craft dynamic and immerse level designs and environments, iterates on the interfaces and so on. And this kind of projects will become more detailed and granular. Even in some ideas will get refined while others will be thrown out. So even though that some of the design could be thrown out because of the party members of the design team doesn't like it, this kind of assets could be used in other project, especially in game projects. That's why I said earlier the assets uh, creation is important, because we don't know what we are going to use and we don't going to use, even though that we are going to throw it out, but it doesn't really mean we delete it for forever, because at the certain point when we focus on the game development, those kind of design will always be usable, and that's why it is important to make sure the design was going smoothly. The next one is the programming activities. So if even in case you decide to use an existing game engine, where we can learn about that later, we as the game developers will need to work on the prototype that we create before and uh, upgrade it into the real games that it should be happening as the part of our plan. We also need to make sure in these activities we can incorporate new features that could be fun or enjoyment to the players. We also need to see, find and fix the bugs that could be introduced along the way. Bugs is kind of an errors that could be potentially pop up in the game development. So that's why, even though that some of the bugs will take time, so we don't find out until the release date, it is still important for us to try to detect and fix those kinds of bugs. So even in the next step, we are using API to uh, release our game, and us as a developer will have to be able to allocate enough additional resources to work and relate and related technical tasks. That's why I said before, when we are going with the individual development games road, this would be a hard things to do, because there are plenty of things that should be finished in a minimum of 2 or 3 people in the same time. And even though that this is possible, this will requires a lot of extra time that would delay the publish date of our game. The next one is the art, graphics and audio activities, because this is where we prepare our assets, and this is what we need to do, because most of the games requires a lot of great number in terms of assets. Our experts such as artists, music composer, voice actors will need to collaborate together with the designers and developers to make sure all of the element fits together. We don't want to make a bad combination between these assets. We don't want to see horror type of games but with some cute background music that it would uh, erase the horror kind of things that could happen in the game. That's why it is important for the expert to collaborate, but in the individual ways they would be even difficult because the one who is collaborating is only by yourself, and believe me, collaborating with yourself is sometimes is a big and confusing task to do, because sometimes we will fight with our own mind whether we think that this is good enough or not, and believe me, this will be the hard way to do. The next one, in the production phase, there are activity we call testing, and this kind of testing is the activity that we do it internally, even though that in testing of games we can do it a lot of time. There are some that we call alpha tests where it is only involve developers. There are closed beta tests, open beta tests. There are a lot of name for this kind of test where it involves a certain people, and in this case the testing phase should always start with the developer and the team inside of it, because this kind of thing is intended as critical activity, because we need to make sure our game is at least good for our eyes. There will be less books, hopefully none at all, but with this kind of activities we could assure that. This is also need to be done because testing a game occupy a lot of time, and in the end of the testing phase it should able to gather more and more people to be able to make the biggest testing before the launching date, because this will means that the development draws to a close end of the development phase, and it will also become one of the events that we can use to promote our games, because if you know, sometimes there will be a game introduction in form of beta testing or closed beta or open beta and so on, and this is also a good business strategy that we can use. Now let's move into the last one, which is the post production phases. So post production is the final task that we have to do continuously. It doesn't mean that after the publish of the game we stop there. No, we still need to ensure that the quality of our game stays the same, or at least it increases bit by bit, because this is also a part of how the society judge our game. And when this final stage is done, we have attained the main purpose, which is usually includes book fixing and updating our games in terms of new content. For example, when we are doing book fixing, we check it while it was running. Even though that we have done it before, still the common practice in the game development, even at the launch day, the game will still most likely have bugs in it, and the one who will report it is our own player. And something like this would be able to happen and usually happen in the first few months during the release of our game. So we need to identify it as fast as we can and fix it, and hopefully it doesn't really affect the quality of our games. In this post production phases as well, we need to focus on the plan and the preparation to add contents, because you know that in game development doing the same thing over and over again will ensure the decrease of our players. So that's why we should be able to have new content updates, and even we can have a new profits in that using the what we call DLC or downloadable content. And this is a common practice that has been done in game development as well. Also, we need to make sure that in post production we have ensure our originality of our games, because there are a saying that no two games are the same. Even the seasoned game uh, development teams will have hundreds of games under their belts. They will often struggle with last minute changes, tight deadline, creative differences, and also other challenges. And this is pretty common in the nature of the game industry. This will also become many things that contribute to game success, that there are no game developers are able to control it, because there are too many variables that could make the game, whether it is become a good game or a bad game, or even it is unidentified at all. We also need to make sure that having a structured game development process will clear deadlines and production goals in a straightforward way. And also this would able to solve the financial burden of our game development progress, and it would also uh, prepare us for the next game development projects. After we understand all of this process, let's move on into the next topic, which is the coding languages that we can use for the game development. Because remember, the topics of our meeting today is about how we can make a game using the no code game development methods. So the first one that we need to aware of coding languages is the coding provides the basis or the fundamentals of uh, the technology that we have now, the devices that also been used at our society. So that's why it would be important for us to know the fundamentals of this coding to become one of our uh, base in order to move forward in the development process in uh, information technology, especially in game development. So the first one, we have C++. So C++ is a popular programming language that has been developed and used for years by PC and console game makers. This is what they usually use when they are going to make games. But there are some disadvantages when we are going to focus to learn this programming language, because This programming language is not an easy language to be learned, but if you're able to master this programming language, it can help you grasp other programming languages easier because the structures is almost the same. And once this programming language is learned, you will have the ability to create even the complex graphics in games engine. For example, the programming language that has been used using this programming language is Unreal Engine, Unity, and also Pyre Engine that was owned by the Sony PlayStation. The next one is C Sharp. Yeah, it's the almost the same common term, but this one is introduced by Microsoft. So this language is basically an added power for developing games focused on the Windows operating system and also their handheld operating system for games, which is Xbox. The majority of this programming language, C Sharp, are developed on the Unity engine, which is used among other things to make a training simulators, software created for first responders as well, such as the firefighter, the search and rescue, etc. Because the Unity engine utilizes visual action and is not made for asset creation, the C Sharp is an intuitive language to learn, even though that this is not really recommended to be used or to be learned by the beginner, same as the C++. The next one we have Swift. This is a specialist programming language that been used by the Apple, and it is one of the competitor in making games, but this focus on the Apple product. It can be used to make Mac games or even OS 10 or iOS as well, in iPhone, iPad, anything. This language also known to be used with a framework called Cocoa and Cocoa Touch, where it is one of the app development that use Xcode technology. So it makes the things exclusively because this entirely a true things that we know on the Apple, but because of its exclusivity. The next programming language is one of the famous one, and some of you may have heard of it, which is the Java programming language. This is one of my recommended programming language that we can use to develop not only for gaming but also in everyday use of programming or information technology. So it is a main language to make a mobile Android games, and it was also the most historical programming language that has made a lot of Flash games where it was operated in a web browser. Some of you may have heard about the famous game on Facebook. Yes, that's also one of the games that has been made using the Java programming language. We also have Lua. Lua is a multi-platform languages that should be able to give you some of the insight of the programming as well. It is also developed by Microsoft, and this game engines is really simple, and the structure and the syntax would be able to be understand freely and easily because this is really targeted to the beginner programmer that are going to focus on making game development. So that's all of the programming languages that we can use. Hopefully you can compare and choose what the best for your fundamentals, but as long as you know the fundamentals of the programming language that we know, it should be able to become your start into the game development. Now let's move on into the next topics. So we have learned about the programming language. Now let's check what kind of game engines that we can use to develop a games without using coding at all. So the first one is Game Maker Studio. So it is also the same with the previous one, but we can also use the Game Maker Studio to create a game even without using the programming language that we have. This game engine would have a lot of features that would help you creating your games using only drag and drop. And even if you're going to move forward and learn and have experience into making games, they have their own game programming languages that they really good to create it and more advanced game. But the disadvantages of this game engine is by its programming language as well, because that is too exclusive. You won't really able to implement it outside of the Game Maker Studio. It is the built-in scripting languages which is also become the advantages and also disadvantages. That's why we need to make sure that if we wanted to choose this game engine, you need to make sure that you won't change any game engine in the future. We also have AGS, or what it stands for, Adventure Game Studio, and this is more focused one of gaming engine because it will focus on point and click type of genre. It's more like a puzzle game, more a mystery games. Then this one is quite rare to be seen. And by using this Adventure Game Studio, we can create the game easily. It also include writing game scripts if we are in advanced level, and it has the capability to easily import graphics into it game engine. So that's why it's a good game engine to use. Next one we have Unity. Most of you might has heard of Unity. Even one of us in Indonesia, we have a popular game that was made in Unity, which is Mobile Legends, one of the MOBA games genre. And this game engine as well can be used to make a game with the no code development methods, but it would be limited to some case because the functionality of game engine for Unity is more focused heavily on the scripting base. But the advantages of using Unity is it could choose between you making a 3D or 2D games. It also have massive of in-store assets where and resources that we can buy or even get for free. There are a lot of many other game that was developed using Unity, such as the Pillars of Eternity, Wasteland 2, Rust, Max the Curse of Brotherhood, etc. We also have RPG Maker that is also same as Adventure Game Studio, where it focused more on one specific genre, which is the role play games. So this will allow you to easily create and focus on the game making. And it also has a lot of pre-made assets such as tile sets, characters, and in-game events, where it's become one of the features that usually been added to the game. It can also edit and create and generate another characters and tileset as we want using the tools that is implemented in this game engine. Even though that this is focused on RPG, this game engine can be customized in some way to create another genre of game as well. But in order to customize this kind of thing, you need to be able to have an experience and uh, learn more about RPG Maker as its game engine. We also have Game Salad. This is also similar to Game Makers. The advantages of Game Salad is they can add more and more easy of game publishing, because it would connect you directly into the Google Play or the Apple Store to publish your game. It would also have an impressive what they call behavior library, which allow the developers to implement complex behavior that someone even without knowledge would have hard time executing or do in order to make their games. So that's all sample of the game engine that you can use for the no code method. You can free to compare what kind of is best for you. I won't push you into one game engine or another. It is free to you to choose from, because that's the point of information technology. Information technology not only giving you freedom to choose what path you want to choose, but it also come with a lot of results that you may attain in the future. So in order to do so, you also need to remember when you're choosing these no-code game engines, this kind of things is not staying at the same form. In the future, this could be even better, because some of the people say no-code game engines is not a good method to be used. But this is not true, because of the development of the technology. It would become much and much more powerful, because even today the game engineer of the game engine developers, they are trying their best to make the engine more and more into a no-code game engine, and it will allow you to create even better games without using coding at all. So this is what you need to keep in mind, and feel free to choose whatever of game engines you want to choose. The next one, let's take a look on the advantages and disadvantages of this no-code game programming. So no-code game programming has two sides of face. Almost everything, that including methods, including object, it will have its own disadvantages and advantages, and we need to make sure that we know those kinds of variable that lead us into a better perspective of our own tools and make it into our own power. Let's start with the advantages. So the advantages of our no code method is, this is not the things that would make you having a problem in code, because everything in the no code method will be done automatically by the game engine itself, so you won't have to worry about this kind of things. You just need to focus on the design, the storyline, the level layout, the content, the asset, the characters, and all of the things that you need to focus on more, because the coding is is finished. As long as you use the drag and drop command, it will be okay to be used. We also have the advantages of operational of game engine, such as lines, memory management, asset loading, lighting, and all of the small features that has been known in the game engine. We doesn't have to code it at all. We just need to click and it will be done for us, even making artificial sun to light up our game world just in a point of click, without using to create command or making a comment on how to make a sun and making sure the light is good, blah blah blah. It doesn't need to be like that anymore. We also have the advantages of cross-platform function. This is the newest solution that we as game developer needs. A lot of game engine will have the capability of producing game and port them into another operating system. So you don't have to do twice the coding, twice the game development to create one at the time. So even though there are some disadvantages on this, then we will talk about it later. So this is the advantages. Now let's take a look of it disadvantages. So the disadvantages of this no code method is, the first one, if we are going to modify our game, you will have to be able to have an experience, because when we are going to modify the application, it would be a different experience than making the games, because you will have to sometimes in the advanced level do the manual code using the new code database as well, and this would become a time consuming activities that would be one that become a problem in the future. We also have the disadvantages of bug in its game engine, and we cannot actually do anything because of that, and hopefully waiting for the game engine to update itself and solve all of this problem. We also have the disadvantages of the game engine that is limited into certain genre that they are made for. So there is nothing much we can do about it, unless when we have experience and to code it manually and tweak your game engine into your own needs. We also have the cost based disadvantages, because mostly game engines are not free, but to overcome this, there are some game engines that have a better business proposal for you. For example, Unreal Engine, where it gives you free access to the engine and even until the production, and it will only take your money if your games are going public and went viral and popular, and then they will take some of the earnings of that games. And I'm personally, I'm interested in that, because I have nothing to lose, and it would be also be a thankful thing for me if when my games be popular, I would gladly give them their share profit that they really belongs to. So that's a good business proposal for me. We also have the disadvantages of when we are going to develop a game which is too small, and when we are using the game engine, it may not be worth of your time to invest, because if you're going to make a small games, it is better for you to just write the code yourself, and it will also increase your experience, and also making you understand better of the game development, because this is more likely into a small task that we can do in our free time. So it doesn't really a good thing to do using the game engines. So as a conclusion of our meetings, by using the no code approach or method of this game programming, we do understand now that even less code savvy individuals who doesn't know how to code could make this kind of game in a certain but limited one. So it is also, if it also possible, when we try to make using this no code method, we don't stay at that method in the future, because this only the first phase on the way if we are going to focus with game development. That's why it is important to us to master the production, the pre-production and post-production phases in order to make the game become a better game that it used to be, and make it into one of your experience, and create better by learning the programming that the game engine require in the future, and make an even better one. Then this will also become one of the best techniques that would uh, introduce you to the whole new level of game development. And I think that's all from me. See you again next week, and have a nice day. Bye bye.